I just took this picture because those fence posts had all sprouted. Again, another swing, the honoring of the kids. This would have been built for the Dashing Festival. Back in Hindu territory very, very much now, so the holidays are still going on. Here I am with our 3 guides. Here's the rest of the porters. They were a great group. We didn't really get to know them that well, but they carried, you can see the rope strap down the bottom there. They carried a drum, and they would sing in the evenings and dance. And, it was just a wonderful group. And here we are back in Kathmandu, street sweeper. That's early in the morning. I was out for a while. And that's the tour of Nepal. And I'd love to answer any questions.
Would you do it again?
No. No, it was a little rough going. I would love to take another trek, maybe in New Zealand. It's a fascinating country. I mean, what I always say is that you really go back to the Dark Ages. You get to see what life must have been very similar to this back in the 4th century BC. Hand-to-mouth, crude tools, aside from a few LED lights with a solar panel on the roof. Basically, life was this way. You travel on foot, carry what you carry with you, and if you have a bad year, you go hungry. And if your older brother wants to take your father's land, you move out, try and find another place to live. It's tough, but I have to say that these people were very proud. The women were very much a part of the social ladder. They didn't feel, nobody felt beaten down on at all. They all looked at us with clear eyes. You can judge what our civilization, the benefits our civilization has, but these people were happy. And if they didn't have medicine, and they didn't have all the things that we have, there was a joy and spiritualism and stability in the way they lived that just, it's hard to compare. It's hard to criticize it.
You said there's very little government influence on the trail. Was it the culture of the people that were really offices?
I don't know. The very strong religious leaders throughout. Pretty much every family, like I said, if you weren't the eldest, then often you would go and join, become a monk or a nun. And there was just strong social fabric that things going. And most of, from our standpoint, most of the trekking company wanted it to be kept clean and acted responsibly. Certainly on our trek, that was a lesser traveled road than the Annapurna trek, for instance. There was 2 guys from Germany who were trekking, just carrying all their stuff, staying in the tea houses. We got to know because they sort of kept piggybacking with them, and some other groups we got to know as we went along, and we were all very respectful and tried to carry out what they brought in and bury what they couldn't. And a lot of respect on everybody's side. There were checkpoints, there was some government there, but the list of rules that were on the wall at the checkpoint, nobody was looking out for. Yeah.
I've read that there are cafes and so on through Nepal that they're sort of throwbacks to the 1970s that play American music of the 1970s, and they're frequented by Europeans and other Westerners. And could you see some of that? Could you describe that?
There's a street in Kathmandu called pie alley where you can go and eat Western food and have pies, serve pies at all these restaurants. Kathmandu is much more developed than when we were first there in the early 80s. You could buy a little cigarette pack amount of hashish for about $35. There were a lot of young people who went to Nepal, could live cheaply, and they brought a lot of bad habits with them. Actually, that same trip, when we were going up to the trailhead on the back of a big truck, a police officer pulled out a huge marijuana joint and was passing around. But yeah, the Kathmandu, not the circuit that we were on, but the more heavily traveled areas, there's a lot of catering of Western food, and that all sort of started with a sort of hippie culture, and so there are definitely remnants of that, and remnants of that in Kathmandu. But Kathmandu has some very fancy big hotels now. They also have a huge population explosion, huge slums, and water is a problem, pollution is a problem. Kathmandu is a very rough city at this point, while they at the same time have some very fancy, very beautiful hotels. Question?
Well, I just wondered how long the trip was, how many days you were on the trail?
21 days.
And you were, how many miles were you covered a day?
I don't know. It had been about 80 miles, 100 miles. It's easier for me to talk about that we were trekking about 5 hours a day, which doesn't seem like that much, seems like there's tons of time. But we had a full break for lunch. They cooked us a full meal at lunch, and we'd rest. And often that's when we would wash because it's so cold in the evenings and at night. And in that, every day there was a lot of up and down, although we went from about 1,500 feet all the way up to almost 17,000. And a day we would go up a couple thousand feet and back down. And it was so discouraging. And while you were climbing, you didn't want to go down. While you were coming down, you didn't want to go up.
I always thought that climbers at high altitude use oxygen tanks. I was surprised that you were looking for, am I totally wrong about it?
We weren't mountain climbing. We were not going up to that peak up there with the specialized equipment. At 17,000 feet, there's not much oxygen, but it wouldn't be typical to use added oxygen at that point. The Japanese have built a hotel up toward Everest that they pipe in oxygen to the rooms, so you can stay fully oxygenated while you're staying.
Did you have to prepare a lot, like do any kind of training before the trip?
We were told not to, that it'd be no problem. Wrong. I just got in good shape. I didn't really do a whole lot of mountain climbing or anything, but I jog out in the meadows. I actually got a little Achilles tendonitis from jogging, and I was worried because I won't get into it, they don't have toilets. You have to be able to squat. And if you don't have your Achilles, I don't know what I would have done. I'm happy to talk about the gastroenterologist stuff we went through offline privately. But really, 25% of our conversations around the dinner table was about how healthy we were staying, I'll put it that way, or not.
How did you purify the water?
Well, that's a good question. Water was always a struggle to carry enough water because the porters would all go, so we have to carry water and process it. So there was a little iodine drops you put in the water, and they would have to be in there for, they try to leave it in for a good long time, a couple of hours. And they would boil water for us at night. Everybody would fill their water bottle, put it in the bottom of their sleeping bag to keep their feet warm, and then it would cool off in the morning. That's what we would have drink and brush your teeth with, and then through the day we would purify. I always carried 2 bottles, one that I was drinking out of and one that was had iodine drops in it. A lot of the water in the villages people were drinking, that's what we would use and then purify. I mean, you can see the goats just right up there above where they were gathering the water.
There was one thing that you could have brought with yourself that you didn't, you really wish you had. What would it be?
I don't know. That's a good question. I was sort of shedding things. I fell in one of the river crossings and my watch came off, and I didn't notice it till up the trail about 20 minutes. So one of the guides came back with me. It was an expensive watch, and I spent about half an hour in the cold water searching for it, and finally gave up. And as I got dressed and was going back up the trail, it was sort of a spiritual shedding of the civilizations. I left my watch behind. You're leaving all your support systems behind. You're leaving medicine behind, although we carried a lot of medicine with us. If you really feel like you're out there in the middle of nowhere, I don't know, I would have brought less rather than more. I think the trick was to have to do without rather than what to bring along with you. If I could bring something back, I would buy one of those little houses and set it up as a museum. I mean, I don't know how much longer that way of life can survive. The mountains all over the world people are leaving. And those little houses are just been that way forever. They're set up with the plates, the precious objects, and it makes you want to just somehow freeze them in place.
Did you see any evidence of education going on in the villages?
Education.
For
For the kids, yeah. Barbie had been, she'd been an administrator for a school in Kathmandu, English-speaking school, and she was very interested in education. As we saw it, there were a couple of schools over on the other side as we were coming down. We saw school kids walking out on the trail in the early morning or at the end of the day. They were going to school. We didn't really see the schools, but there were schools along there. They were all little kids, grade school age kids. If there was schooling for the older kids, then they would be sent out to boarding school for that. So there was education, but it was very poor. I'd say most people didn't know how to read except for the ones who went off to the religious schools, that kind of life. And then some of the schools were just empty and not being used. And the government it kind of disappeared the last couple of years. So support money from outside, from Nepal was not there. Whatever you saw was coming from foreign countries supporting whatever they could.
This brings back memories. I went on a trek from Pokhara to the Annapurna Base Camp
Yeah.
24 years ago. Me and Banners. Anyway, things I remember are you have to be terribly careful about drinking and eating, and people was trying to sell you pop,
Soda.
Coca-Cola and all that stuff that was recycled. They use the same bottles and bring the stuff down here. So we were cautioned not to drink that stuff. Also, I got very sick the first day.